The stranger mailed me a $7,000 0 cents wedding invitation, listing my backyard as the venue. Not a request, not a mistake. A full itinerary with champagne toasts, valet parking, and my grandmother's garden marked as photo ready. No permission, no heads up, just pure weaponized entitlement wrapped in gold foil. And behind it all, Karen. HOA Karen, the kind who thinks her clipboard overrides property law. She booked my house for a wedding, and I booked her a front row seat to karma. I got a wedding invitation listing my backyard as the venue. I hadn't even RSVP'd to my own lawn. It was taped to my front door like a coupon flyer, sealed in thick cream stock paper with gold-trimmed calligraphy that screamed wealthy chaos. I thought it was a prank, or maybe one of those real estate mailers pretending to be something classy. But no, this was legit. It had a detailed itinerary, RSVP codes, and a little map highlighting my garden, my gazebo, and even my driveway. The Galloway Caldwell wedding, it said. I didn't know a single Galloway or a Caldwell. Yet, according to this, in 3 weeks, 200 people would be gathering at my house to celebrate a union I had zero emotional investment in. There was even a section about valet instructions, which I suppose was generous, considering the valet would be parking on my gravel. At that moment, I was standing barefoot on the porch of what used to be my grandparents' home, an old craftsman with peeling paint, rusted gutters, and a garden that looked like it was mourning someone, which, to be fair, it was. My grandmother Marlene passed 8 months ago after a long fight with ALS. I'd quit my job as a mechanical engineer in Seattle to come back and fix the house. It wasn't much of a plan, but grief doesn't follow logic. The house sat on 5 acres in a quiet corner of Cypress Hollow, a tucked-away suburb in Oak Ridge County, where deer outnumbered people and the HOA presidents wore pearls and vendettas. The land had been in our family for generations. My grandfather planted the stone path that looped around the garden. My grandmother grew roses, older than most of my coworkers. The idea that someone had just claimed it as a wedding venue sent a heat wave of disbelief down my spine. I walked the garden that afternoon, the invitation crumpled in my fist. The yard wasn't wedding ready, not unless you were into decaying bird baths and squirrels aggressively making eye contact. But the bones were still beautiful. There was a gazebo, half covered in ivy, flower beds overtaken by stubborn, territorial weeds. The whole place looked like it belonged in a Southern Gothic novel. And now, apparently, also someone's Pinterest board. The invitation even had a floral theme that matched the old rose varieties out back. Someone had done their research, or reconnaissance. I felt a knot tightening in my stomach. The RSVP card listed a contact, Karen Galloway, mother of the bride. Of course, there it was, Karen, the final boss of suburban warfare. I didn't know her yet, but I could feel her energy radiating off the paper, entitled, perfumed, and probably in possession of a monogrammed clipboard. I called the number. No answer. I didn't leave a voicemail because I wanted her to hear my voice live. When I asked why she thought it was acceptable to plan a wedding on property, she didn't know. This wasn't just trespassing. This was organized delusion with catering. I grabbed a beer from the fridge and sat on the porch swing that still creaked like Grandpa's knees. The invitation lay beside me, daring me to pretend this was a misunderstanding. But deep down, I knew better. In towns like Cypress Hollow, Karen isn't a person. She's a phenomenon. And something told me this wasn't her first logistical oversight. I took a long sip and looked out at the yard, my yard, and whispered to no one, "This is going to be a problem." And, it was just not the kind she saw coming. The next morning, I called the number on the RSVP card. I was halfway through my coffee and 3/4 of the way through imagining how Karen Galloway must look, probably blonde, definitely smug, possibly wearing tennis shoes that had never touched a court. It rang 4 times before I got the voice I expected, chipper, overpronounced vowels, and sugar-coated like a pie crust that hides a razor blade. "Hello, this is Karen Galloway, mother of the bride and head of the Willow Lake HOA. How can I help you?" I took a breath. "Hi, Karen, this is Brandon Ellis. I'm calling about the Galloway Caldwell wedding invitation that lists my backyard as your venue." Silence. Then a laugh that could have been mistaken for a cough if it weren't so offensively cheerful. "Oh, you must be the Ellis boy. Yes, such a charming property. You'll love how we've arranged the ceremony. Very tasteful. Garden chic meets rustic elegance." My jaw clenched. Karen, I didn't agree to host a wedding. This is private property. I live here. No one asked me about this. Another beat of silence, this one longer, heavier. Then came the switch. The voice went from syrupy to managerial in 3 seconds flat. Mr. Ellis, the Cypress Heritage Council gave us full approval months ago. They've managed venue bookings for years. Everything's above board, I assure you. Now, I'm not a lawyer, but I do know how to Google. There's no such thing as the Cypress Heritage Council listed as a legitimate registry in Oak Ridge County, and I would have remembered agreeing to share my backyard with 200 people and a live harpist. But Karen spoke like someone who'd had practice ignoring facts. The property is historically significant, she added, like that somehow nullified my ownership. You should feel proud. You're contributing to the charm of the community. She might as well have said I was being selfish for not donating my lungs to the HOA air supply. I ended the call before she could start describing color schemes. 5 minutes later, I was at my laptop, fingers flying. And that's when I found it, a professionally designed website called fosterheritagegardens.org, complete with aerial drone shots of my house, my garden, and even the cracked concrete bench by the koi pond that no longer had koi. The headline read, Victorian Whimsy meets Southern Charm. Below it, available Saturdays, May through October, $4,500 base rate, curated floral options available. There was a calendar with bookings already listed, including 3 dates that hadn't even happened yet. I scrolled down to the footer, managed by Willow Lake HOA, in partnership with Cypress Heritage Trust, the only trust I felt was violated. Somewhere between fury and disbelief, I clicked through the gallery and saw photo after photo of my grandmother's roses, her handmade stone arch, the back patio where I used to sneak cookies during family reunions. Every image looked recent, taken while I was away, or maybe even during the week I'd flown back to Seattle for my friend's wedding. And right there on the contact page in fine print was the name, Karen Galloway, Event Liaison. The audacity had layers, like a wedding cake made entirely of fraud. Called City Hall, no such council existed in the local register. I called the county clerk, no permits, no zoning exemptions, nothing about my property had ever been filed for public use or commercial rental. Karen had built an entire fantasy operation on a domain name and a string of lies. It was impressive in the same way pyramid schemes are, technically clever, morally repulsive. I closed my laptop slowly like it might catch fire. Then I looked out at the backyard where a squirrel was aggressively burying something under a rose bush. At least someone in this town respected private property. I grabbed a notebook and started writing down everything I'd found. Screenshots, quotes, names. Karen had kicked a beehive she didn't know was active. She thought she'd snagged another passive homeowner, but I wasn't passive. I was patient, and if she wanted a wedding, she was about to get a ceremony she'd never forget. I didn't sleep that night. Between the adrenaline, the research rabbit hole, and the images of my grandmother's rose garden being defiled by folding chairs and canapes, my brain was a pressure cooker. By morning, I'd circled 3 things in my notebook. 1, Karen was running a full-scale wedding scheme. 2, she was doing it under the HOA umbrella. 3, she was not expecting someone like me to actually show up. So I did. At 10 a.m. sharp, I walked into the Willow Lake HOA office, an aggressively beige building wedged between a dog groomer and a tanning salon. The waiting area smelled like vanilla-scented aggression. Behind the counter sat a woman named Tiffany, spelled with 2 I's, who looked like her hobbies included yoga, gossip, and passive-aggressive Post-it notes. Do you have an appointment with Miss Galloway? She asked, already bracing for a no. I smiled. Tell her Brandon Ellis is here. She'll know why. 5 minutes later, I was escorted into a glass-walled conference room that looked like it was decorated by someone whose Pinterest board was titled Executive Blandness. Karen was sitting at the head of the table, flanked by 2 men in business casual hostage gear. Collared shirts, tucked too tightly, and faces that looked like they hadn't blinked since the Bush administration. She gave me a tight-lipped smile and gestured to the seat across from her. Mr. Ellis, to what do we owe the pleasure? I didn't see it. I pulled the printed screenshots of her wedding website from my folder and slid them across the table like court evidence. You're advertising and renting out my property without permission. We're past pleasantries. One of the men, the one with the mustache and the emotional range of a stapler, cleared his throat. Karen, unbothered, reached into a leather binder and produced a single sheet of paper. "We anticipated your confusion," she said smoothly. "Your grandfather authorized venue use before his passing. This agreement gives us full access under the Cypress Heritage Initiative." She placed the paper in front of me like it was gospel. I looked down and saw it. A permission form allegedly signed by my grandfather, Richard Ellis, dated 6 months before his death. The signature was a joke. My grandfather's cursive was impeccable, military-level penmanship. This looked like someone tried to sign his name while being chased by bees. Even better, the witnesses listed were Karen herself and a man named Carl Duncan, who, as it turned out, was also the HOA. How convenient. I picked up the paper with 2 fingers like it might stain. "You do realize forging a document is a felony, right?" I asked. Karen's smile didn't move. "You're welcome to challenge it through official channels, of course, but I would remind you, Mr. Ellis, that the Willow Lake HOA represents over 200 homeowners and has strong standing in local governance. I'd hate for this to become unpleasant." The threat was so polite it could have been embroidered on a throw pillow. I walked out without another word and drove straight to the office of our family attorney, Alan Grady. He was semi-retired, ran his practice from a restored barn, and had represented my grandparents for decades. Alan flipped through the forged document with a look of disgust. "This is a bad fake," he muttered. "Your grandfather would rather eat in mulch than sign anything with Karen Galloway's name on it." Then he opened a locked file drawer and pulled out a manila folder thick with paperwork. "Your grandfather expected this," Alan said. He had me draw up a full legal packet before his health declined, just in case someone tried to pull something like this. Inside were property deeds, zoning documents, letters explicitly rejecting HOA inclusion, and even a notarized statement that read, "This land shall remain private, unincorporated, and free from HOA interference now and forever." My grandfather was many things: a war vet, a landscaper, a bourbon drinker, but above all, he was thorough. Alan leaned back in his chair. "You've got everything you need to shut this down legally, but knowing Karen, she won't back down with a letter." I nodded, already formulating Plan B. I didn't just want her to stop. I wanted her to regret ever learning how to spell my last name. And for that, I needed more than paper. I needed an audience. I was right. Karen wouldn't fold just because I had the legal equivalent of Excalibur. People like her don't fear documents. They fear disruption. But before I could go nuclear, I needed to know who I was really dealing with, so I started digging. Not just online. I went old school. Phone calls, coffee shop whispers, that one nosy neighbor named Denise who knew every marriage, mortgage, and midlife crisis on the block. What I found wasn't just an HOA president with a clipboard complex. Karen Galloway was the queen bee of an entire suburban power hive. Her brother-in-law sat on the Oak Ridge County Zoning Board. Her daughter, Madison, the bride in question, worked for a boutique real estate firm that sold most of the homes in Willow Lake. Karen's best friend since high school, city inspector, the guy who approved permits with a rubber stamp and a wink. It wasn't a coincidence that the website for Foster Heritage Gardens also linked to Madison's listings, many of which advertised proximity to charming local venues. One of them literally used a photo of my gazebo with the caption, "Perfect for brunches, bridal showers, or intimate ceremonies." If Karen wasn't running a scam, she was certainly playing Monopoly with real land and fake rules. The deeper I went, the worse it got. I found 4 past weddings held on my property in the last 18 months, none of them with permits. No one had contacted my family. Each was marketed as part of the Heritage Series by the HOA, priced at $5,000, 0 cents a pop, with rustic garden charm included. That's over 20 grand straight into the HOA slush fund. According to Alan, none of that money had ever passed through public accounting. No paper trail, just a series of event donations listed in whole play minutes with no detail. Classic HOA play. Vague on paper, aggressive in practice. I reached out to one of the past brides through Instagram. Her name was Tessa, and she thought the venue had been graciously donated by the HOA for heritage celebration. When I told her the property wasn't theirs to donate, there was a long pause before she messaged back, "Oh my God, are you serious? Karen said it belonged to the city and that you were just a groundskeeper or something." That last part hit harder than expected, not because it was insulting, but because it was strategic. Karen was running the long con. If she could reframe my role in the neighborhood as a nobody, a caretaker, a squatter, she could justify her claim. It wasn't just manipulation, it was image warfare. And she'd been doing it to other people too. Denise told me about three neighbors who tried to protest HOA initiatives. Their house paint suddenly violated aesthetic harmony. Their grass was too expressive. One guy had a plastic flamingo that mysteriously disappeared after he questioned HOA fees. Another had his deck reported as unsafe even though it had just been rebuilt. Karen didn't argue, she orchestrated with mouths of subpoenas. I sat on the back porch that night, flipping through printouts of wedding listings, fake council minutes, and a screenshot of Madison's Zillow bio, which casually mentioned deep connections to Cypress Hollow heritage properties. It wasn't just about my yard. Karen was building a brand on lies, loopholes, and a lattice of local power. But like any spider, she'd gotten too comfortable in the center of her web, and I was about to start yanking threads, starting with a very public unraveling. Karen had spun her web, sure, but she'd forgotten one thing. I don't do passive-aggressive. I do strategic demolition. After years of designing industrial systems, I knew something most clipboard tyrants don't. The best way to collapse a structure is from the inside, with timing, patience, and just enough noise to shake the whole damn thing. I wasn't going to file a lawsuit and wait 12 months for justice. I was going to burn the whole wedding plan to the ground. Metaphorically, of course. First, I needed optics. I started with the little things. I contacted Evergreen Earthworks, a local landscaping company run by a guy named Marcus, who once told me over a beer that HOAs are just colts with bushes. He loved the plan. Said he'd bring the crew, the gear, and even a backup generator if I wanted to simulate trench digging. Then I called Patriot Potties, a portable toilet rental company that Karen once banned from her community for being too blue. I ordered 16 of their loudest, brightest, most obnoxious porta potties and scheduled delivery for the Saturday before the wedding. For good measure, I requested they line them up directly across the front lawn, facing the road like a parade of plastic defiance. Then came the big guns, a demolition rental company with a taste for theatrics. I rented a compact bulldozer, not to actually destroy anything, but to send a very loud message. This property is under renovation. Do not enter unless you have a death wish or a legal deed. I scheduled its delivery right after the potties early enough for maximum visibility. Saturday morning traffic through Cypress Hollow might be slow, but news travels at warp speed in a gated community with Facebook moms. But the piece de resistance, Trevor Doyle, college roommate, minor YouTube celebrity, and currently running a channel called Civic Savage, dedicated to exposing HOA abuse, small-town corruption, and over-decorated cul-de-sacs. He once got 1 million views filming a homeowner repainting their mailbox live while a Karen threatened to call the mayor. I sent him the full rundown, photos, documents, fake contracts, and the wedding invite, and within 10 minutes he texted, "I'm in. This is HOA gold." He arrived 2 days later with 3 GoPros, a drone, and a moral vendetta that ran on black coffee and spite. We scoped the angles. We set up cameras, one in the birdhouse, one in the gazebo, one tucked into a broken planter. Nothing illegal, all on private property. Trevor even brought a lav mic in case Karen tried her usual sweet threat voice. We didn't want just confrontation, we wanted context. We wanted the full narrative captured with the kind of clarity that made internet commenters say, "Oh, she messed with the wrong guy." Of course, I didn't tell anyone the plan. The fewer people who knew, the better. The element of surprise wasn't just satisfying, it was strategic. Karen thought I was some lonely DIYer fixing up his grandparents' house and clutching deeds like bedtime stories. She had no idea I was 3 spreadsheets deep into a social demolition plan with backup audio, legal cover, and a revenge arc tight enough for Netflix. By Thursday, the pieces were locked in, crews were confirmed, cameras hidden. Trevor was editing a teaser trailer. I even had T-shirts printed that said, "Ask me about HOA weddings," just in case someone wandered onto the lawn mid-chaos. I wasn't just going to stop Karen. I was going to flip her little empire upside down and let the town watch her crown roll away. And the best part? She still thought the wedding was happening. The florist had been confirmed. Caterers booked. Her daughter Madison was still posting countdowns on Instagram. The guest list had hit 200. And Karen was probably picking out her pearls, completely unaware that her big day was about to meet my bulldozer. Saturday morning arrived like the opening scene of a revenge comedy. Birds were chirping, the sky was obnoxiously blue, and by 7:45 a.m.ing the first truck, Patriot Potties, rolled up my driveway like it was making a statement, which, to be fair, it was. The crew, two guys in neon vests and mirrored sunglasses, and greeted me like old friends. 16 stalls like you asked, the driver grinned. Got 'em in civic blue, Cairnsley's favorite, I assume. Perfect, I said, gesturing to the open lawn near the road. Line 'em up like a royal procession. 20 minutes later, there was a shining row of plastic thrones facing the street, like they were about to declare independence from HOA tyranny. Next came the pest control van, a massive yellow truck with serious spray solutions plastered on the side. It parked with theatrical flair just as a few early joggers passed by. The crew put up bright "Pest treatment in progress, do not enter" signs and began fogging the perimeter with organic cedar oil. Harmless to humans, devastating to Karen's aesthetic. The scent filled the air with an aggressively piney aroma that said, "This is not your Pinterest wedding." Just as the fog began to settle, the main attraction arrived. A low-loader hauling a compact bulldozer. The thing gleamed in the sun like it had just been waxed. The driver, Marcus, hopped down and handed me a hard hat. "For the look," he said. I put it on. Power was a good fit. By 9 o'clock AME, the stage was set. Trevor had GoPros rolling, the drone was circling, and the banner I'd commissioned the night before fluttered above the driveway. Sacred property, not a public venue. Trespassers will be filmed and laughed at. The first Karen sighting happened at 9:24 a. Silver Lexus SUV pulled in like it was chasing a sale on fake empathy. She stepped out in white capris, tennis shoes so clean they squeaked, and a sun hat large enough to cast judgment. Her face went from smug to confused horror in real time. "What is this?" she barked, waving at the porta potties like they'd insulted her bloodline. I stepped forward, clipboard in hand, safety vest glowing. "Morning, Karen. Just getting the property ready for some major landscaping work. Excavation, drainage overhaul, pest mitigation. You know, owner things." "You can't be serious," she snapped, eyes locking on the bulldozer like it had personally betrayed her. "The Galloway Caldwell wedding is next weekend." I blinked, feigning surprise. "A wedding? That's funny. I don't recall approving that, and since this is my house, I'd be the one to approve it," tapped the banner for emphasis. "Maybe you missed the memo." She stormed closer, her voice dropping into that sweet but threatening HOA tone. "We need to talk privately." "Oh, absolutely," I smiled. "Right this way." I led her to the side of the house where Trevor stood adjusting his camera. "Karen," I said, just loud enough, "do you remember forging my grandfather's signature on that usage agreement?" Her face froze. "That's a serious accusation. On camera," I added, nodding at Trevor. Her eyes flicked to the blinking red light, and that's when she knew. The trap wasn't in the potties or the bulldozer. It was in the narrative, and I owned the edit. Before she could spin a lie, a white BMW screeched into the driveway. Madison, the bride, flung open the door in full meltdown mode. "Mom, what the actual hell is going on?" Her mascara was already halfway down her cheek, and her voice cracked like a broken flute. Karen tried to intercept her with arms outstretched. "Sweetheart, it's just a misunderstanding. You said everything was set. The flowers, the catering, the drones, Mom." Madison pointed at Trevor's quadcopter. "Is this guy with the HOA?" "No," I said, stepping in. "He's with me. And just so you know, none of this was ever legal. Your mother forged documents, misled your vendors, and tried to steal a wedding venue." "What?" Madison turned to Karen like she'd just been slapped. "You told me the owner was some hermit who didn't even live here." "I live here," I said. "I just don't post about my lawn on Instagram." The yelling got louder. Rebecca, Madison's wedding planner, showed up next, followed by the florist in a Prius and two guests who clearly didn't check the date. It became a full-on HOA soap opera. Karen tried to regain control, but the crowd wasn't buying it, especially not after Trevor began asking people for on-camera reactions. Madison was in tears. Rebecca threatened to sue. Someone yelled, "Is this going to be on YouTube?" The answer was yes. As Karen backed toward her Lexus, trying to save face, I leaned in one last time. "You wanted a show, Karen. You just forgot who owned the stage." She didn't reply. She just got in the car and drove off. Wedding dreams shattered, reputation imploded, and half the town filming her taillights. But I wasn't done yet, because what happens after the fire is just as important as lighting the match. And I had a few more logs to throw on the pyre. By Sunday morning, Cypress Hollow was no longer just a sleepy suburban neighborhood. It was a hashtag, and the trending image was a side-by-side split. One half showing a row of civic blue porta potties in front of a premier property banner, the other of Karen Galloway mid-screen with a bulldozer in the background. Someone had captioned it, "Live, Laugh, Lawsuit." Trevor uploaded his video that afternoon. "How I Cancel a Wedding with a Bulldozer. HOA Karen Gets Caught." It wasn't clickbait, it was a documentary with cinematic flair. GoPro footage, drone sweeps, dramatic zoom-ins, and clips of Karen trying to claim that my grandfather gifted the property to the community. The video included receipts, interviews, and my favorite moment, Madison yelling, "You forge a contract, Mom," while a confused florist arranged peonies next to a caution sign. Within 12 hours, the video had over 2 million views, and the comment section turned into a meme war zone. Aaron tried to host a wedding and got evicted from reality. Plot twist, the real groom was Justice. This is why bulldozers were invented. Local Facebook groups exploded. Screenshots of the forged agreement and wedding site were shared faster than HOA newsletters during HOA decoration season. Even people outside of Oak Ridge County were weighing in. Someone found the Willow Lake HOA's annual budget, and surprise, nowhere in it was the $20,000, 0 cents plus from Heritage Wedding donations. Within 48 hours, the HOA board had no choice but to respond. They issued a stiff typewritten statement about allegations currently under review. Karen was placed on administrative leave pending a third-party investigation, which was the polite way of saying, "We're throwing her under the bus, but slowly." Then came the apology tour. First was Sharon Blake from 2 doors down, the one who once fined a neighbor for a politically aggressive garden gnome. She showed up on my porch with lemon bars and a rehearsed apology. "I had no idea Karen was operating like that," she said. "I just wanted the HOA to be orderly, not criminal." Over the next few days, more neighbors trickled in. Some brought coffee. One guy brought a 6-pack and said, "I always hated her, but I didn't know how much I hated her until she tried to rent your lawn like a damn Airbnb." Most of them signed a petition that another neighbor had started, a formal motion to restructure the HOA, install new leadership, and put financial oversight in place. The best part? Karen's own power base started to fracture. Her daughter Madison deleted her wedding countdown posts and went silent on social media. The real estate agency she worked for removed her photo from the homepage. Even Karen's best friend, the city inspector, suddenly took personal leave, and word on the street was that the county's fraud division had taken interest after seeing forged documents in a viral video. I was sitting on my porch, bourbon in hand, when Trevor called. "You know, you just became a local legend, right?" he said. "They're calling it the flush herd round the hollow." I laughed so hard I nearly dropped the glass. That's when I realized this wasn't just about me anymore. Karen had pushed the whole community around for years. My little act of revenge had accidentally ripped the mask off a system everyone hated but didn't know how to fight. And while the memes were funny, the results were real. Karen's reign was over, her fake venue operation exposed, her allies gone, her HOA crown dethroned and trampled under 16 portable toilets and a Caterpillar D3. But I wasn't done, because sometimes burning the house down isn't enough. You've got to build something better in its place. And I had one more move to make, one that would remind everyone why the garden was never for sale. A week after the video went viral, the porta potties were gone, the bulldozer was picked up, and the yard was finally quiet again. Not Karen quiet, the type enforced by rules and complaint slips, but real quiet. Peaceful, like the land was finally exhaling. I stood at the edge of the garden one morning, coffee in one hand, trowel in the other, staring at the overgrown beds my grandmother once called her sanctuary. It was time to stop reacting and start restoring, not just for me, but for her. I started small, pulled weeds, turned soil, ordered heritage rose cuttings from a nursery in Virginia that specialized in old varietals. I found her planting journal in the attic, tucked between old cookbooks and yellowed seed packets, filled with diagrams, bloom dates, and little notes like, "Don't trust the bluebells, they lie." Walter Jenkins, the retired groundskeeper who'd worked with my grandparents for years, showed up one morning with a truck bed full of tools and no explanation. "Figured you could use a second set of hands," he said, already digging before I could answer. Within a few days, others joined. Neighbors who'd once turned their backs now offered help. One woman brought iced tea and planted daisies. A teenage boy cleared rocks from the path without being asked. Even Sharon Blake came by with a flat of lavender and an awkward apology. No HOA mandates, just people being neighbors. Imagine that. One afternoon, a small envelope arrived in the mail with no return address. Inside was a handwritten card. "Thank you for exposing the truth, for saving me from a wedding built on lies, and for reminding me that love should never come with a forged contract." It was signed simply Madison. Tucked inside was a photo from her new wedding, this time at a vineyard 2 towns over. She looked happy, relaxed, the kind of happy that doesn't need chair sashes and HOA-approved garden arches. I pinned the photo next to the old family photos on my fridge. A weird souvenir, sure, but a satisfying one. Sharon, for her part, didn't stick around long. A moving truck appeared one morning, loaded in silence. No goodbye parties, no HOA newsletter tribute, just a for sale sign where her hydrangeas used to be. Rumor was she relocated to Florida to reset her energy, which I assume means hide from public humiliation in a humid climate. The HOA board resigned in stages. A new group was voted in, smaller, more transparent, more "please stop filming us" in energy. They dissolved the Heritage Venue Initiative entirely and returned the unused funds to the community. Not perfect, but a start. By the time spring rolled in, the garden had bloomed again. Not entirely, it would take seasons to rebuild, but enough. The gazebo had a fresh coat of paint, the walkways were re-graveled, roses began to climb the trellis again, slowly but stubbornly, like they had something to prove. And when the first warm Saturday came, I strung lights between the trees, set out folding chairs, and invited the neighborhood over. No speeches, no rules, just music, lemonade, and mismatched picnic blankets. Kids chased fireflies, old folks danced on the grass, someone brought a peach cobbler that disappeared in 6 minutes. Trevor showed up late, still wearing his YouTube hoodie, and filmed just a few minutes. For the sequel, he winked. I stood near the gazebo watching the lights sway in the breeze and thought about my grandmother, how she always said a garden wasn't just about flowers, it was about patience, care, and knowing what to keep and what to cut. She would have loved this night, not because it was fancy, but because it was real. And just when I thought the whole saga had finally ended, a neighbor tapped me on the shoulder with a sheepish smile. "Hey, Brandon," he said, holding up a glossy postcard. "You might want to see this. Looks like someone's trying to start a historic venue tour in Maple Ridge." I raised an eyebrow, taking the card. Another HOA, another Heritage Council, another clipboard-wielding crusader. I took a sip of lemonade and smiled. Guess I wasn't out of the wedding business just yet. Sometimes the best revenge isn't a lawsuit, it's a lemonade stand in a restored garden where the only clipboard allowed is for the BBQ signage sheet. What started as a forged wedding became a full-blown community reset. A reminder that property lines aren't just drawn on maps, they're defended by memory, legacy, and a healthy sense of humor. Karen tried to turn my backyard into her personal wedding factory. Instead, she got bulldozed by truth, porta potties, and public opinion. So if you've ever been steamrolled by HOA madness or ambushed by a Karen with a fake title and real entitlement, drop your story in the comments. Like, share, subscribe, and remember, boundaries matter, roses bloom back stronger, and nothing says "get off my lawn" like 16 bright blue toilets and a camera crew.